Our environment is a beautiful, complex ecosystem uniquely designed to balance and replenish itself. The advent of climate change, however, poses great danger to that ecosystem and consequently to lives and livelihoods. So disastrous is the effects of climate change that it has been termed as the biggest challenge of the century by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Fabiola Monti is an environmental specialist from the island of Mauritius. I asked her how dire the threat of climate change is.
So climate change can have an impact on the intensity and frequency of extreme weather events. This includes cyclones as well as over storms. So if you have an increase in intensity and frequency of storms, so it can have an impact on the coastline. It presents a threat to the community living nearby. For example, because of storm, you can have stronger wave energy. And if you have household living near the coastline, then you can have impacts on the community. Besides that physical threat, you can also have impact on the livelihood of communities. So the more often you have these extreme weather events, like fishermen, for example, cannot go out, or even the natural habitats that are nearby can be impacted by climate change. And this have an impact on, for example, the provision of goods and services that communities depend on.
In the recent past, you can see we have been swinging from a disaster to a disaster. When we have rains, as a country, we should be able to enjoy that we have a good harvest and perhaps deal with the issue of food security. But you have seen when we have rains, we have floods. The flood's gone, then we have drought. Forests are part of the major aspect that can mitigate us or provide shock from absorbers from the extreme weather conditions.
Coastlines are particularly categorized as highly vulnerable to climate change-related disasters. On the first defense of our coastlines are the mangroves, unique tropical forests with profound importance to the ecosystem given their exceptional ability to capture and store carbon, a major contributor to climate change. Losing them, therefore, can pose great danger to climate, wildlife, the people and their livelihoods.
Conserving mangrove ecosystem is an important forest which is an interface between land and ocean in the coastline. And as a country, we have about 60,000 hectares of mangrove. It may look small, but it's a defense line for the Kenyan coast, and we must be able to protect it.
High dependency on mangroves by communities along the southern Kenya coastline has, however, in the past, resulted into massive degradation of the mangrove forest, exposing the very communities to danger.
Back in the 80s, in our country, there was a lot of lime making and a lot of logging. So what happened? They came and cleared up this place completely for the lime making. The lime is what the white color that they do on the houses. So, it was too much affected that it would not regenerate itself.
Kwa sababu kulikuwa kuna uharibifu ambao tunaendelea.
People would sneak to the mangrove forest and cut the trees. We then decided to recruit youths to guard the mangrove forest, and since then, the mangroves are safe. We also received funding from KCPD, and we were able to build a watchtower to help the guards protect the mangrove forest.
But as the saying goes, every cloud has a silver lining. In southern Kenya, along the coastline in Gazi Bay of Msambweni, Kwale County, a community group has found opportunity in mangrove conservation.
Mradi wa Mikoko Pamoja tumeanza kama miaka 10 iliyopita.
We started Mikoko Pamoja 10 years ago with sponsorship from Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute. They did a study and found that mangroves are the best absorbers of carbon. We then decided to start selling carbon as a business. We were lucky to find buyers of carbon credits through Mikoko Pamoja.
Ambao wao wananunua hiyo carbon kupitia Mikoko Pamoja.
Mikoko Pamoja, Swahili for Mangroves Together, is the world's first community-based project to use sale of carbon credit to fund mangrove forest conservation and community development.
Mikoko Pamoja is a carbon offset project that is community-based. It came together with the efforts of three main building blocks. We have the community, we have the government, and we have the scientists. So the community came in with this resource that they live adjacent to, and they've been able to take care of it and changing their lifestyles. We have the government, KFS as the custodian of, Kenya Forest Service as the custodian of this forest, came in with their goodwill and allowed for us to use it and to have co-management with the community. We have the scientists who brought in the technical support which guided into getting the carbon credits being sold by the community.
Based on research by leading mangrove experts and with the support of the Kenyan government and the people of Gazi Bay, Mikoko Pamoja combines science with a commitment to ecological and social justice through the main pillars of restoration of degraded mangrove forest, protection of existing mangrove forest, education of the community members on the importance of mangroves, and improving the lives of the community.
We go to the mangrove forest and measure their height, weight, and how the soil is. And after that, we do our calculations and sell the credits.
By protecting this forest, we're ensuring that these mangrove can absorb carbon dioxide, which is a contributant to climate change. We're also ensuring that climate change over the future doesn't become worse, so communities do not have to face more extreme weather events in the future.
Under this project, community members plant mangroves and conserve the existing mangrove forest, thereby accumulate carbon credits. External buyers of carbon credit then come in and buy the credits accumulated through Association of Coastal Ecological Services, which holds the money until the project's targets are all met.
The carbon offset is basically reducing carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. So it can be from an individual standpoint or from company's standpoint. Let's say, for example, a company is emitting such amount of carbon dioxide or over greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So we can invest in projects or activities. For example, an example is the project, a mangrove restoration project, or it could be just planting trees in other areas. So we are compensating for that release of greenhouse effects by planting trees which not only can absorb carbon dioxide, but we can also invest in projects that reduces the amount of greenhouse gases.
The Mikoko Pamoja is basically just trading carbon from the forest in the international market. We use the Plan Vivo standards where three things have to be shown. We have to have a community benefiting, the climate benefiting, and the biodiversity benefiting. So the climate benefits by trading the carbon offsets, from the carbon credits from the forest, and the biodiversity, the forest is improving, and by it improving its functionality and supporting the many other creatures and biodiversity within it. And we have the climate. The forest is assisting in absorbing the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and storing it. So what happens? The community have changed how they relate with the forest. They have reduced their destructive ways with the forest, and that effort, and also planting and restoring the areas that were destroyed, that effort is what they present at the international market, and they get the credits from that.
Over 10,000 mangroves have so far been planted under this project, which covers 117 hectares of land, attracting $15,000 income annually, equivalent of 1.5 million Kenya shillings every year.
Every time it rains, we plant around 4,000 trees. We plant the same number of trees in a year.
The money raised from the sale of carbon credit is in turn used for mangrove conservation as well as for development of social amenity projects selected and designed by the local people for their own benefit.
From the sale of these credits, they've been able to benefit in a number of ways, because the monies that come have been pumped into community projects where they have improved on the water provision, education, the health, where they've provided some equipment for the clinics and the hospitals, and also other community groups like football team within the project. They've also been able to employ directly some of the community members within the project who are getting a payment, monthly payments.
Kwa sababu pesa ikiletwa lazima tuitishe mkutano.
When we are paid, we convey a community meeting because the community members are the ones who decide what the money will be used for. We decided to buy textbooks and desks for primary schools. We also installed water taps, and now the whole village has access to clean water.
Kupitia hiyo mradi wa Mikoko Pamoja.
When it comes to climate change adaptation, it's very important to have a community-based approach and to include communities. Because when you're talking about adaptation, it's about protecting communities, it's about protecting societies from the impact of climate change. Now, if you're going to protect communities, you need to know what are the impact. You need to understand what are the vulnerabilities, have they been experiencing over time, what are the threats that can happen over the future, and what are the adaptive capacities, what do they have at present, what are the way of livelihood, how diversified the way of livelihoods are. So without knowing that, you can't really help communities to adapt. And if you don't ask communities, sometimes you may invest a lot of resources for several years, but then the impact at community level may not be the same if you haven't listened to the issues they're encountering.
Mikoko Pamoja is an illustration of how people can come together and combine their effort in the clarion call for Sustainable Development Goal number 13 of climate action in mitigating the effects of disasters posed by climate change through conservation of their environment and earn money from it.
I think this is a very good example on how you can be contributing to different environmental challenges. So it is climate change mitigation and also biodiversity conservation and also community development. There is not a lot of success stories for Africa in general. So this is an example of how it can be done